October 14th, 2020 is the day my life almost ended. And by clicking on this video, you already know that this is the story of how I became paralyzed. Hi, my name is Tara Shetterly, and I've been a T1112 paraplegic for almost 5 years now. This has been my most asked question since becoming a creator, but what some people don't realize is how emotionally charged this story is. But at this point in my journey, I genuinely feel ready and I want to share it. So here it is, search no further, no need to imagine the possibilities. In my opinion, a lot of things have to go just right for it to end up so wrong. And that's kind of what happened that morning. It started with me having mysterious cardiac symptoms, mainly tachycardia, breathlessness, dizziness. So my dad and I drove 2 hours to a specialty pediatric cardiology appointment in the same lot as a level 1 hospital. The appointment ran over an hour late, and I remember us joking about how we might just leave, but we didn't. We stayed. At the time, the doctor wanted to rule out a serious condition called long QT syndrome, so I ended up leaving that appointment with a portable EKG called a Holter monitor wrapped around my chest. It was honestly a huge hassle, and we had to sign paperwork saying that we understood how expensive the Holter monitor was, not to break it, whatever. So we ended up leaving. I got in the passenger seat of my dad's extended bed pickup truck, texting my boyfriend to let him know everything the doctor had said, as teenagers do, but unfortunately in doing so, I forgot to put my seatbelt on. My dad and I were looking to see where we could stop for food, distracted. And what we didn't see was that there was a stoplight to exit the hospital parking lot. Even though it was a 25-mile-per-hour speed zone, my dad did accidentally go through the red light. Again, no seatbelt. And I just remember out of the corner of my eye, just like in the movies, a small gray sedan a split second before impact. I think I had time to say, "Oh my God," right before the car directly T-boned me on my passenger side of the truck, flipping us 360 degrees in the intersection. I was then ejected backwards through the rear windshield to end up laying in the truck bed. I woke up right after, and all I could see was the blue sky right above me. I had forgotten what happened, and for a brief second, it was like I had no thoughts at all. It's weird thinking about it, but I don't think I've ever had as much peace as I had in that 1 second. And I started thinking to myself, like, wow, I cannot wait to tell people about this really weird dream. It felt so real, except the dream didn't end. So I did the only thing that I could do at the time, which was raise my right arm straight up into the sky and ask for help. I could tell people immediately started to form a circle around me, which is never a good sign, even when you are not thinking clearly. Panic starts to set in. The only thing that I could move at the time were my arms, and I remember seeing that they were bloody. Immediately I knew that I couldn't feel my legs, which is, again, not a good sign. But at the time, I really had no knowledge about spinal cord injuries or paralysis in general. So combined with the intense stomach pain, the fact that I couldn't breathe, the blood, I embarrassingly thought to myself that maybe my legs weren't paralyzed, they had just been cut off. And I know that sounds so extreme, but it is the truth. Obviously, that was not the case. But I'll never forget the first bystander that came to me when I asked for help. He held my hand while I squeezed on as hard as I could, hoping that that would anchor me. I wasn't crying at the time. I don't think I ever shed a tear, but I was extremely terrified of dying. So I just just refused to let his hand go. And according to my medical records, my spine was visibly deformed, which I did not get to see, but I could feel, unfortunately. I have never and hope I will never experience that level of screaming pain ever again in my life. It truly did feel like I had been ripped in half. And time was not moving as it usually does. Even looking back now without a concussion, I have no idea how long any of these things took. It felt like seconds were minutes or hours, which again, I have never experienced anything like that before. I also remember the paramedics asking me multiple times why I had the Holter monitor on, if you remember me telling you about that, which was a great question, but funnily enough, I was just as much worried about the Holter monitor being broken and how expensive it would be. So again, looking back with the clear-headed perspective now, that was just one of the few funny moments. Mind you, all of the time I spent from waking up to in the hospital, I was still unsure if any of this was real. And honestly, I feel a little embarrassed because I know I must have asked hundreds of times, is this real? And I was cussing. I just had no inhibitions left. I'll put on the screen the only scan that I have of my injury to my spine before they ended up going in surgically to repair things as much as they could. But my total injuries included this list here on the screen: mild TBI, memory impairment, cognitive impairment, which I've already kind of discussed how that played its role from when I woke up to a few weeks after with the most intense migraines. I couldn't even see this far away from my face. Complete dislocation at T11 and 12 with complete impingement on the spinal canal, which is why I immediately could not feel my legs and still can't to this day for the most part. I fractured my 7th rib on my right side and also collapsed my lung, which is why I said that I couldn't breathe. They ended up putting a chest tube there, but I also broke other segments of my spine in the neck region, thoracic, and lumbar. Basically, I broke C4 and 5, displaced C2. Obviously, I broke T12, mildly displaced L1, and I also broke L1 in multiple places. I believe my doctors referred to L1 as a burst fracture, and I also broke L2. My most critical injury was actually traumatic aortic transection, which basically means that the part of my aorta, which is my major blood vessel, right by the heart in my chest region, was torn. The impact from deceleration of the car basically ripped my aorta. Not good. Obviously, I needed emergency surgery to fix that. I have no complications with that to this day. So a lot of times I forget how serious my injuries were. And then finally, I had a big road rash on my thigh and I had hand lacerations. But honestly, it's kind of impressive knowing that pretty much all of my injuries were internal. The outside pretty much was unscathed. So all of this left me with what was originally diagnosed as T11-12 Asia A complete spinal cord injury, which basically means that I was as paralyzed as you can get from the waist down. And you might be wondering by now, what happened to your dad? What about the other car? What about your heart condition? Luckily, everyone else had pretty minor injuries. My dad was also concussed, but he tried to be there for me as much as he could. I ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital and 2 weeks in rehab, so let me know if you want a video talking about how that was. But as far as my heart, I ended up being diagnosed with inappropriate sinus tachycardia, which is more annoying than it is serious, so we have that under control now. So those are the cliff notes, but because I wasn't originally public with what happened, some people made up their own stories that I did it to myself or just completely untrue things. So I wanted the story to come from me. I do automatically put my seatbelt on now as a routine. But no one can definitively say that I wouldn't have ended up paralyzed if I hadn't have been ejected that day from not wearing a seatbelt. I personally think that most of the damage came from the impact itself on my right side, not from the ejection, but that's just my opinion. Regardless though, everyone's injury story is very personal, and I don't think people should try filling in the blanks themselves or sharing another person's story without their permission. And although I'm sharing this story with you today, I don't necessarily think that others should have to, or that it's okay to ask them to do the same. Usually this is the worst or one of the worst days of someone's life, and I would appreciate it if you guys could just be kind to people and allow them the privacy that they deserve. I don't want anyone to feel bad for me because in the grand scheme of things, being alive is such a blessing. So I will eternally be very grateful that I was paralyzed in the parking lot of a level 1 trauma hospital and that I got such immediate medical attention, and that I felt that my brother's spirit was there with me that day to protect me because I was not ready. Even if something terrible happens to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't go on to make beautiful memories that are filled with love and happiness. I've had a great life so far using a wheelchair. Post-traumatic growth is very real. So if you've made it this far, thank you for listening and supporting me. I'll be sharing more soon about everything that's happened after, but until then, know that your story is not over. Thank you.